This video supports co-ops in reaching 50% gender parity for women and non-binary people, and increasing representation of equity-deserving groups, including Indigenous peoples, Black and/or people of color, people with visible and invisible disabilities, and 2S LGBTQ+ and/or gender and sexually diverse individuals. It really stems from the BC Co-operative Association and the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association working together in partnership with Women's Economic Council and working on resources specific to co-ops to support building more equity and inclusion in their processes and structures and systems. And I think we really drew from several of the cooperative principles in creating the video series. One of them is the principle around education and training, and our intention is that these videos will be widely available. Anyone can access them and bring it into their contexts and share with their teams and hopefully bring some of the ideas into practice. One of the other cooperative principles is related to community care, and I think one of our intentions is that this will support collective care and looking after the well-being of everyone who's a part of the cooperative, members, employees, board, and that everyone is sort of lifted up through this. The other cooperative principle is Principle 6, cooperation among co-ops, and that's been one of the energizing parts of the video series is being in relationship with several co-ops who are highlighted in the videos.
Some of the things that we've been doing behind the scenes, the equity and inclusion team is really focusing on curating content through the What Works toolkit and of course the 50-30 challenge, so that we can ensure parity amongst women and equity deserving groups in co-ops. So our team has built out an organizational readiness checklist that really is focused to board and leadership to see where they're at in their equity, diversity, and inclusion journey, because it's a journey, right? It's not a quick fix or a 3-month, 4-month strategy. It's really going to take time to get to equity ultimately. A lot of times equity deserving groups don't have the opportunity to voice their opinions in a safe manner, and a lot of the times they might come into an organization with already trauma in their systems from past harassment, bullying, or whatever may be the case in other organizations. So the psychological readiness checklist really makes sure that an organization is safe for their employees, and ways to make it safer as well, so that employees have an opportunity again to speak their truths, to increase their voices. The other curated piece or tool that we really wanted to focus on was an accountability practice, because it's really important to weave that into whatever policy is available for employees. It's not enough for an employee to just say sorry if harmful behavior has been experienced by particularly someone from an equity deserving group. It's really important to focus on how can I change that behavior to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And it also allows other folks within the organization to know when to call in or when to call out harmful behaviors as well, and what it looks like if someone does harm someone in an organization, what that looks like for the future, what steps are taken to ensure that this behavior doesn't occur again. Another tool that we've really been looking at is the board nomination process and what that looks like, because part of this video is talking about how to strengthen board and leadership, and particularly representation within those groups. So for co-ops looking to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion in their boards, I would like to say to take a couple steps back first and to really look at the membership as a whole. Who are our members? What communities do they represent? Do they represent the communities that we serve overall? And if not, what can we do to be more inclusive and to have services that feel relevant to people of all identities, and particularly equity deserving groups? We're open to all. That's a very passive approach, to sit back and say, hey, my door is open if you want to join. But instead, trying to take an active approach and meet people where they feel safe and engaged, and show that their thoughts and perspectives are valued. So if you start by doing that, then you can look at what does our board composition look like. And an important question here, inspired by Lily Zheng's work, is, do our members trust that our board is representative and accountable? And if not, that's where we have to dig deeper and to understand what the barriers are and how we can remove them. So look at nomination processes, making sure that they are accessible, that the language used is neutral and welcoming, and that we value lived experiences when selecting board members. And then also look at governance structures and decision-making processes to make sure that people that are currently serving in the board, they feel safe to show up as their genuine self. They feel safe to bring up concerns and potentially negative feedback. And because that is something, that's a reputation that the members will hear about. And it's only if they feel like they will be welcome, and that their diverse ideas will be heard, that you will get the members interested in taking on these roles.
And in our work, we've talked about how diversity, equity, inclusion work needs to be beyond human resources, which is often where it's housed. It needs to be throughout communications, how meetings are facilitated and organized, decision-making, and really diving deep that way.
An equitable and inclusive cooperative sector, to me, looks like having a sector where people from all walks of life can come and feel supported and be able to find success in a values-driven way.
It always starts from the top. When leaders understand the importance of diversity and inclusion and how it can benefit not only their employees, but the overall health and the overall health of the organization and the business, they'll be able to implement measures of how we can start the work. Budget and financing is a huge piece to it. Diversity and inclusion work is a commitment. It is a lifelong journey, and it's continuous, and it's never ending, and it will continue to evolve.
The co-op commitment to inclusivity is reflected in the first of the 7 cooperative principles: open and voluntary membership. Co-ops are open to all persons without gender, social, racial, political, or religious discrimination. I think there's 2 challenges to fully realizing this principle in British Columbia. Some communities have faced linguistic and other barriers to accessing the support needed to establish their cooperatives, and so more needs to be done to actively connect with these communities with culturally appropriate resources. Co-ops need to collaborate to meet mutual objectives, and these collaborations need to be more diverse. The more inclusive and diverse, the more likely we will all succeed.
And I think the key for co-ops to show value for equity and inclusion is to celebrate and invite their members to show up as their whole selves, past, present, and aspirations for the future.
Every 2 months, we get together and invite folks from other co-ops and offer them an opportunity to dive deeper into topics that are important to take into consideration when it comes to advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion, and ensuring that 50-30 parity or representation. We had one in March that really focused on positionality and social location and the intersections of identities. It's really important that as someone from that dominant cultural narrative who is supporting equity deserving groups to understand what their power and privilege may be in society and what those oppressions of identities or which identities get oppressed and marginalized more in society. So we did a positionality activity that really asked folks to think about their own positionality in society and to ensure that they're understanding how to make change with the power and privilege that they have. Yesterday we had another community of practice that went really well that talked about power and power dynamics and what that looks like within systems and structures, and the different types of power, because it's really important to understand that power isn't necessarily hierarchical. It's everyone has some form of power, and once you realize what form of power you have, then it's easier to enact changes within systems.
We need to be able to see and notice power and power dynamics, and we also need to recognize our personal power and agency and the collective power when we group together with folks to embody that. So I found it really exciting and hopeful, and that was some of the feedback from participants, feeling empowered. And so I think the community of practice is a great space for peer-to-peer learning, cooperation among co-ops, and with a focus on bringing it into practice. So part of that listening deeply is holding humility, acknowledging that you don't know, that the path may be not clear, and so there's some trying things out, reflecting, evaluating, and changing, and trying again.
Another really important piece of the 50-30 challenge is training. What types of training do we need to ensure that women and equity deserving groups can get into co-op development, leadership positions, board positions, and what that looks like? It's really important to tie in equity to all those training pieces. So it's not enough just to say a woman needs to be assertive to, climb up the ladder, for example. If the environment is not psychologically safe, that woman will not feel safe in that environment to speak up or raise a concern, for example. And she may be pushed out of the organization if it is not psychologically safe for her. So it's really important to take into consideration this training through an equity lens.
I'm together with Litzy and Michelle now working on putting together a guide for mentorship and sponsorship. And as it relates to advancing equity and inclusion, we will put an emphasis on sponsorship. And that is not to say that mentorship is not as important. Mentorship helps create new connections and grow valuable skills. But what often happens is that that's where it stops for women and equity deserving groups. They get mentored and all the support to grow these skills, and that makes them very qualified for career advancement. But when it comes to filling a vacant position, these individuals' names aren't spoken in the room where the decision making is happening. They aren't recommended for the jobs to the same extent as their white male colleagues, for example. So what our team is looking like now is to create a resource that will help guide co-ops on how they can design a formal sponsorship program that breaks these patterns of giving opportunities to people that mirror current leadership.
I love how it all weaves together, and it can seem quite big. And I think part of our work together has been how do we create this in components that people can look at, focus on, and move on to the next one, weave that together. You might need to circle back. I think we're supporting folks in looking at pieces of it, and so that the overwhelming doesn't happen or is less likely to happen. I mean, we speak quite often about how this isn't solitary work. That's also part of dominant culture, is having folks in silos and working alone. And so our team is reflective of being a collective. And that's to share the weight of this work and also share in the joy and the celebrations.
I think that an equitable and inclusive future in co-ops looks like the cooperative sector representing the actual composition of communities in Canada, which is already very diverse.
When I imagine an inclusive and equitable cooperative future, I think of governance models that effectively account for differences of opinion and allow all voices to be heard, listened to, and respected. In this future, cooperators of all identities and backgrounds are empowered in decision-making processes and valued for their skills, expertise, and experiences.
On a personal level, equity and inclusion mean that I don't have to prove my value, but that my value is recognized for me being myself.